Hey guys, I want to talk to you about something that was shared last week at men's meeting. The message was born for such a time as this. It was the theme, and we went through the life of David up until he met Goliath. And the whole point was what David did in the fields to protect the sheep, against a lion, against a bear, prepared him for Goliath. Like he was born prepared, born for such a time as this. And while we were reading that, it's in 1 Samuel 17. While we're reading that, you know, I feel like the Lord just illuminated this issue for me in Scripture, showed it to me in Scripture that I've struggled with for a while, and I don't even, unbeknownst, I don't even know sometimes that I struggle with it. It's a habit thing, it's a routine thing, and talking to some people, I don't think I'm the only one that struggles with it. So I want to read it, share it with you, and hopefully leave you encouraged by the time I'm done. So, of course, 1 Samuel chapter 17, starts off Goliath comes out, and he just challenges Israel, and everyone's afraid, and they cower back and everything. And then, of course, Jesse sends David, with supplies and food and stuff for his brothers. And David gets there, and Goliath comes out and does his routinely taunt, and he's like, "Who is this guy that he's gonna go? He's even gonna defy the Lord like this? Like who's letting this happen?" Kind of thing. And he gets fired up, and and then of course we know that David, ends up killing Goliath. But what I want to do right now is I want to start in verse verse 32, and so 1 Samuel 17 verse 32 out of the New Living, and it says this: "Don't worry about this Philistine," David told Saul. "I'll go fight him." "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth." But David persisted. "I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats," he said. "When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will also rescue me from this Philistine." Okay, Saul finally consented. "All right, go ahead," he said, "and may the Lord be with you." Okay, so right off the bat, just to back up for a little bit, in the verses right before that, David's questioning about the giant, and he's like, "Okay, what's going on? Let's do this. Like, who gives this guy the right to do this?" And David's brother comes up and is like, "Shouldn't you be tending the sheep? Whatever." This is what I see a lot of times. Christians are faced with a big issue, a big circumstance, a big trial, a big whatever. They're faced with some big thing that it's sometimes scary or fearful, and it's overwhelming at the time. And right off the bat, most of the time we act like the Israelites did, and we cower. Whatever it is comes up, and it starts taunting us, and it starts saying that it's bigger than our God, and that, it's just disrespectful, and and we cower, just like they did with Goliath. We cower, or in the simple things that a lot of times within the body, if there is an issue and somebody stands up and says, "Yo, I'll take this need," we want to attack that person. Like, well, who are you? Like, what right do you have to do this? Mostly because we're talking out of our own fear, and because we want to step up and we don't. So when somebody else does, whatever. But I like how David handled it here. He used the power of his testimony. It wasn't his power, but he used his testimony of what of the power that God had worked through his life. And so he's like, "This is how God has prepared me. This is how God has saved me, kept me, and he's going to do it again because he's done it before." And that's what persuades King Saul to say, "Oh, well, all right, you're a child, you're a boy, and we'll give you a shot to go at this." It was the power of his testimony that one, because he was there, because he knew it existed. He knew that the Lord was going to keep him. He knew that he was prepared because the Lord had used him previously similarly. He knew. He was confident in the Lord because the Lord had fulfilled things, similar in his life through him already. And so he was confident because of his testimony. Saul was like, well, let's give this kid a shot, right? And so I feel like when things come up, whether they're directly to us or within the body or just somebody or a friend or something, we need to remember our testimonies. Even the smallest little things, the smallest testimonies, even if it's you finding something, you're looking for something, you're praying for it, you find it, or something as silly as, whatever the thing is, if the Lord worked in it, it's worth bragging about. It's worth boasting in the Lord. And as the power of our testimonies is what's going to raise morale and build courage, not in ourselves, but in God, in what He's done previously in our lives. He will do again, and it's a good way to build up faith, remembering what the Lord has done. Okay, so moving on. I said the last thing I read was in verse 37. Saul finally consented. And he says, "Go ahead, may the Lord be with you." Well, the next thing that he does, then Saul, in verse 38, gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped a sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. "I can't go in these," he protested to Saul. "I'm not used to them." So David took them off again. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. Okay, that's another thing that we do. I've been working in teen ministry for a while. I've been in situations where I've kind of had to work, in leadership roles over people. I've worked beside people, under people. One of the first things we do when situations happen, when things happen, when you're giving somebody, when you're entrusting something into somebody, we like to do exactly what King Saul did, because out of our own fear, out of our own, worry or what doubt or whatever the thing is, we want, someone's like, "Oh, I can do this," and you're like, "Okay, well, you do it, but here's my helmet, here's my armor, here's my sword, you can do this, but you should do it how I would do it, because I'm confident in my in what I've always known." And one of the things that I've always said, like when we have guest speakers and stuff, people sharing with the teenagers, is and it didn't always start off this way. It's been a recent thing, but they ask me what I'm going to speak on, and so I'll give them a topic. And 9 out of 10 times I will say, well, this is the topic, this is the general theme. You take it, pray about it, and however the Lord gives it to you, I want you to bring back to me, and and basically, however the Lord gives it to you, that's how I want you to bring it. Because even though I want to work with you on a theme, I don't want to get in the way of the Holy Spirit. I don't want to get in the way of something that the Lord is trying to give to me, or to give to the teens, or to give to, wherever the audience is. I don't want to get in their way. I want to learn whatever it is the Lord wants me to learn. Sometimes it would be very simple to just, when asking people to speak, say, "Here's your topic, here's your outline, here's your points, here's your verses, make sure you say this, and this." It would be easy to do that, because it takes a lot of faith to just trust people to minister, publicly. You have to know that they're studying, you have to know that they're going to do what they're going to do. And so the point to that is, I've been in situations where I've said, "Hey, I can do this." I've been in situations where I've been Saul, and in situations where I've been David, where people have said, "Hey, let me help," and I'm like, "Whoa, okay." And then within me, the first thing I want to do is rise up and say, all right, well, here's my armor. And then other times I've been David where I said, hey, I can do this. Raise my hand. I'm ready to do this. And someone's like, okay, but you got to do it this exact way. And the problem with that is, the Lord guides us differently, and the Lord has entrusted us with different gifts, and this is the thing. Just like David couldn't wear the armor because it was too big and he's not used to them. Maybe something that maybe a gift or something that the Lord blessed you with, you've walked in for years. I'm not comfortable in, but this is the thing though. Just like King Saul was born for this time, you know, David was born for this time too, and Saul was supposed to cower. Saul was supposed to not put his armor on. David was supposed, to not put it on either. Um, this is the thing that it's interesting to me is out of all these soldiers, out of all these people in the army, um, a boy, a boy is like, I got this. Give me a, he's walking around basically with a toy. Well, what we would imagine a toy nowadays, a slingshot with with a rock. And we have all these military, these army men who are, these guys trained for this, and they can't do it, and there's boys like, I'll do it. Well, first of all, it had to have been, again, the power of his testimony, the Lord working through David. There's no other way that I could ever see that a king would tell a child, okay, go out there to your slaughter. It had to be the Lord working through, obviously working through all this, but for Saul to do this. But like I said, I don't think it's a coincidence that Saul was like, okay, do this. Here's my armor, and David puts it on and says, I can't. I'm not used to it. I can't move in it. I've never worn these things before. And I think that it's really important that in Saul's mind, he could in his mind, and he's thinking of this. Okay, well, I'm gonna let this. We're gonna give David a chance. But in his mind, he couldn't fathom him going out there to fight without a sword, without armor, without without the essential things you would have in this typical situation. And so he didn't leave room for the fact that, David had a slingshot and rocks. Because in his mind, he's like, well, this is the way we do this. And I feel like a lot of times we get in the same rut, whether it's in ministry or whether it's in our routines. We're faced with these huge Goliath things, these huge, gigantic issues, whether it's culturally or personally or whatever it is, we are faced with giant issues. And the first thing we want to do is throw on our armor, throw on what somebody else knows that's worked in the past, or throw on armor that's worked in the past for us, but for another issue. And I feel like just like David had faith in God, and he grabbed the stones and he grabbed the sling, and he took off the armor and he went out there, basically completely, in the scheme of things, completely naked. I mean, he was dressed, but I mean, in the scheme of things, he had no armor. He was totally exposed. He was completely exposed, and he was vulnerable. And he went out there and he trusted in God. And, from the moment he took that step out to the moment he slung that rock, he trusted in God. As vulnerable as he was, as small as he was, he trusted in God. And so, I feel like, Saul, even though he heard the testimony of the lion and the bear, and he knew, that David, my God has saved me through this, and he has taught me through this, and he heard the testimony, and it was so powerful that he said, okay, boy, I'll give you a chance. Go see what you and your God can do. The issue that I have with trying to relate this to everything is, a lot of times, we're the same way. We need to be like David in this instance. When we have gigantic issues coming face to face, our first reaction is to be Saul. Our first reaction is to run to armor, or run, or run and cower, first and foremost. But or that's our first reaction because we're afraid. Saul was afraid. If Saul wasn't afraid, he'd have went out there and taken care of Goliath by himself. But it was fear that crippled the whole army. And so the first thing, because they didn't have faith in God at the point, they had faith in themselves, and they knew this giant's bigger and stronger and uglier and meaner and all this other stuff. And so, David comes up and he's like, well, I don't have faith in myself either. I have faith in my God. And so I feel like right now, as the church, culturally, where we're at, personally, we have a lot of Christians who don't desire things of the Lord, kingdom things. They're too busy building on rocks, building on sand, and they're not building on the rock. And I'm just, maybe it's because of fear, so they're going to what, they're going and they're talking to people and they're saying, well, here's my armor, this is what worked for me, and so they're like, well, we got to build a house and raise, and get money, and we have to keep up with the Joneses and all this stuff. I just feel like, just like David, when these gigantic issues come up, we need to have enough faith in God to say, look, he got me through this in the past. He's got me through this, and this. We have to acknowledge those things. We have to talk about those things, and we have to remind ourselves and others so that when these gigantic issues come up, all we have to do is walk out. We don't have to go through this old, the old way, put on the armor, the old way, the only fathomable way within our own thinking. God's ways are different than ours. We have to have faith in God, trust that he's going to get us through it, take that first step out, even if we're completely vulnerable. Most of the time we're going to be, because that's where God wants us to be. That's how he's going to work through us when we get to a place where we couldn't have done it without him. And so we need to trust God to get to these things. And then, what's the final result here? Goliath, in verse 41, Goliath walked out toward David with the shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. Am I a dog, he roared at David, that you come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his gods. Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals. David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. Of course, as Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his bag, took out a stone, hurled it with a sling, and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down to the ground. David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. Then David ran over and pulled the Goliath's sword from its sheath, and he used it to kill him and cut off his head. That's what we need to do. When gigantic issues happen, we need to not be like the army who's cowering in fear. We need to not be like Saul, who's so afraid that they're not thinking straight, that they just want to run to the old ways, run to, what's worked in the past. And we need to be like David, and we just need to be faithful. Whether it's ministry, whether we're entrusting with somebody else, if the Lord put them in that position, obviously there's accountability, but if the Lord brought them in that position, have faith. They might not do it exactly how you do it, but the Lord's going to use them and work through them just the same. And when we get these gigantic issues coming up to us, we need to just wholeheartedly, vulnerable or not, reply to those issues just like David did. We need to, straight up, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And then our reply should be, today the Lord will conquer you, and I will cut off your head. The Lord goes before us. The Lord fights the battles. The Lord does all the work. We have to just show up and be obedient. And I just want to encourage you that no matter what you're going through today, whatever's going on right now, whether it's a gigantic issue, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling stressed, you're whatever you're going through, wherever you're at right now, God is still there. God has not left you. God is still fighting the battle for you, and He just wants you to acknowledge it. He wants you to acknowledge the stuff He's done in the past, the stuff He's doing now, and the fact that He's still going to be doing stuff in the future. And what He wants us to do is whether we're I'm not talking about the armor of God. The armor of God, we can be walking it completely. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the old armor, our old ways, the ways we used to deal with things, in the flesh. We need to leave that junk behind. Not just because it worked back then. The Lord's trying to do something different now. It doesn't matter if we're afraid and we know that well, this is how I used to do it because you're comfortable in it, because it works. We need to just trust the Lord, be vulnerable, let Him work through us, and just in the name of the Lord, declare the victory for the Lord. Stand strong and watch the Lord work through you. Watch Him work through you. It's going to be amazing. So, like I said, my encouragement to you today is no matter where you're at, no matter what's going on, small little issue, big gigantic Goliath, whatever's in your path, trust God. Take that step out there. Remember what He's done for you in the past. And just go out there. The Lord's already equipped you with everything you need up until this point. The quote that was said, I don't remember the quote, but the thing that was said, the key part that stuck out to me over the whole message was this: everything you have done up until this point has prepared you for this point, and and this point is preparing you for everything that's coming in the future. So everything you've been through is to train you up for now. And where you're at right now, whether it's hard or easy, it's to prepare you for what's coming. So don't be lazy in it, Born for such a time as this. And we need to trust God through all of it. So I just want to encourage you that if you whatever you're going through, put your faith in God. You guys have a good night. I will talk to you later. God bless. You be praying for me. I'll be praying for you.